Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. What is the biggest security challenge for India? Arguably China. So the Indian security apparatus has been gearing up to meet that challenge. It's a long process, but it's very much underway. Tonight we'll tell you about one such major shift, an entire corps in the Indian military dedicated to the LAC, line of actual control, the de facto border with China. We'll tell you what this entails and why it's significant. Meanwhile, Taiwan is facing a new threat from Beijing. Chinese Coast Guard officials boarded a Taiwanese tourist vessel and harassed the passengers and crew. In Israel, the war is taking a toll on the economy. The GDP dropped by 5% in the last quarter, almost twice what was projected. In the Ukraine war, it's advantage Russia. Is 2024 the year Russia will win this war? The answer is yes. A Western aid continues to dry up. Down under, Australia is doubling its warships, spending more than $35 billion on naval upgrades. In the UK, diseases from the 19th century are making a comeback. In South Korea, a major doctors' strike has hit health services. In South Africa, a ship with thousands of cattle on board is making Cape Town stink. We'll also tell you about the new car that Putin has gifted Kim Jong-un and what classrooms of the future will look like with the advent of technology. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Julian Assange makes a final legal attempt to fight his extradition to the US, but the WikiLeaks founder was absent at a key court hearing in London. Assange's lawyer says the Australian is not well. Washington wants Assange to face trial for publishing secret military and diplomatic files. In India, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi taken into custody briefly. The arrest was over a 2018 defamation case for his remarks against Union Home Minister Amit Shah. The opposition leader was later granted bail. Rahul Gandhi faces at least 10 other defamation cases. Guinea's junta freezes the bank accounts of dissolved government members, also orders their passports to be seized. On Monday, the junta dissolved the government, which had been in office since 2022. In 2021, the military came to power in Guinea in a coup. Malaysia's currency, the ringgit, falls to its lowest level in 26 years. This year, the currency has already dropped by more than 4% against the US dollar. Its performance has been affected by poor exports and rising US interest rates. And the Eiffel Tower is closed for the second straight day due to strike. On Monday, the staff went on strike to protest the way the monument is being managed financially. The Eiffel Tower is one of the world's top tourist attractions. India's border pivot continues. For decades, the focus was on the northwestern front, on Pakistan. But now it's on the other side. The focus is on China. Reports say the Indian Army is making a big change. It is converting an area headquarters into a corps headquarters. I know you will have questions. After all, it's a very technical change. But do know this. If true, this is a massive upgrade. And it's all about focusing more on the LAC. That's the line of actual control between India and China. Think of it as a de facto border, LAC. Now we come to the details. The Army's Central Command has an area headquarters in Bareilly. It's called Headquarters Uttar Bharat. And what does it do? Mostly peacetime activities like administration and training. At first, the Bareilly headquarters had just one brigade, plus a few scouts battalions. Then came the clashes with China. So the army added more teeth. 3 brigades and 1 infantry division were put under the Bareilly headquarters. Now, to put that in context, 1 brigade has around 3,000 soldiers. So 3 brigades is more than 9,000 soldiers. But the army is not done yet. Like I said, the next step is reportedly in the works to turn the Bareilly headquarters into a full-fledged corps. And what difference would that make? Well, a corps is largely self-sufficient. It has its own artillery, its own army engineers, and its own aviation assets. So basically, a corps can conduct operations on its own. It also has the resources to do so. Reports say the new formation will be called the 18 Corps. It is designed to include 3 divisions. Again, to put that in context, one division can have 15,000 soldiers, 15,000 troops. So the 18 Corps could have up to 45,000 soldiers. And their focus will be on the LAC. That's the pivot I mentioned at the start. Before the Galwan clashes, the army had 5 corps focusing on the LAC. Pretty soon, that will be 7. First in line was the One Strike Corps based in Mathura. Until 2020, it focused on the border with Pakistan. Now it focuses on China. Next up is the Area Headquarters. It's being turned from a peacetime formation to the 18 Corps. So the army's message is quite clear. It wants to be prepared along the LAC. Which brings us to the bigger question. What's the current situation there? The Indian Army Chief gave an assessment last month. He says it's stable but sensitive.
The situation along the line of actual control, I would say, remains stable but is sensitive. In the last 1 year or thereabouts, we haven't had any more friction areas in this. In terms of what is our preparedness levels, I would say our deployment remains robust as well as balanced.
What does that mean? Things may not get worse or escalate. At the same time, it's not business as usual at the border. It's been like that for a while now. After the Galwan clashes, both sides deployed a lot of firepower. India has deployed some 68,000 soldiers. China too has around 60,000 soldiers. They've also made structures near the LAC, structures that can house up to 120,000 soldiers. So the idea is quite clear. Beijing is ready to rush troops at a moment's notice. India too has been busy. Whether it's building roads or tunnels or bridges, again the idea is connectivity to make sure that the LAC is accessible to Indian soldiers at all times. So the militaries are locked and loaded. What about the diplomats? What about talks and negotiations? Well, the last military level talks took place in October, the 20th round since Galwan, October last year. Both sides said the talks were frank and constructive. They also agreed to maintain peace at the border. Great words, but no progress. Because at several points near the LAC, disagreements remain. So de-escalation has not happened yet, which brings us to the political leadership. Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping in August last year. Both men were in Johannesburg for the BRICS summit. They agreed on speedy disengagement. We've seen more conversations after that. This week, the foreign ministers had an interaction in Munich. I guess that's positive. We're talking about 2 nuclear-armed giants in the same neighborhood, so we cannot afford volatility. We need to contain the standoffs. But tell that to China. Reports say they're moving Chinese nationals into villages near Arunachal Pradesh. Why? To provoke India. Which is why New Delhi remains wary of the LAC. It's like China's poking machine. They know that India is emerging as an economic powerhouse. They also know that investors are leaving China. So the LAC is their way of pulling India down. Sort of like keeping New Delhi in check. We may not see sustained aggression, but we can't rule out sporadic clashes. Hence the Army Chief's assessment, stable but sensitive. That cannot be said for China's equation with Taiwan. It is tense. On Sunday, China's Coast Guard issued a statement, a message for Taipei. The Chinese Coast Guard is shifting strategies, engaging in more aggressive patrolling in the waters around Taiwan. And why is this worrying? Because Chinese troops are closing in. They'll now be in the vicinity of Taiwan's forces, closer than ever before, and this raises the threat of a clash. It even threatens civilians, Taiwanese civilians. Yesterday, there was a flare-up. China harassed a tourist vessel. It's called the King Xia, a Taiwanese ship, King Xia. It was out on a tour yesterday. There were 34 people on board, 11 crew members and 23 passengers. The boat was near Kinmen. Now, Kinmen is an archipelago. It belongs to Taiwan. But it's barely 10 kilometers from Chinese mainland. So China's Coast Guard took advantage of this. When they saw the King Xia, the Taiwanese ship, they dispatched 2 patrol vessels. These Chinese vessels intercepted the King Xia. 6 Chinese Coast Guard officers ended up boarding the ship. They spent 30 minutes there on board a Taiwanese tourist ship. Doing what? Harassing the passengers and crew. The Chinese Coast Guard asked the ship's crew for their documents. They had no right to do this because this was a Taiwanese ship operating in Taiwanese waters. So why did China do what it did? To intimidate the passengers and by extension, Taiwan. In fact, leaders in Taipei have the same assessment.
When Chinese boats cross into our waters, we know that these boats are not illegal at all and they just entered by accident. We would just broadcast warnings and hope that they leave immediately. So we think China boarding and inspecting our boat yesterday has harmed our people's feelings and triggered people's panic. It was also not in line with the interest of the people across the strait.
But China has no plans to dial down tensions. Instead, it is doubling down. Today, the Chinese Coast Guard engaged in more provocations. They dispatched a boat, again towards Kinmen. The boat entered the waters near the islands. Taiwan's Coast Guard spotted the Chinese vessel and responded immediately. They sent their own boat to intercept the Chinese. And they were successful. Taiwan's Coast Guard issued a warning through radio and repelled the Chinese boat. But the threat persists. They'll have to keep their guard up. So Taiwan is now stepping up patrols and deploying radar and surveillance around the Kinmen Islands. Because the Chinese boats will not stop coming. The question is why? Why the provocation now? What has made Beijing so angry? Possibly the events of last week. 2 Chinese fishermen drowned near Kinmen. We'll tell you what happened. Just like today, a Chinese boat crossed into Taiwanese waters. It was not a Coast Guard vessel. This one was a fishing boat. But it sparked suspicions. The fishing boat had no name, no ship certificate, and no registration. There were 4 people on board. When they entered the Taiwanese waters, Taiwan's Coast Guard spotted them. They tried to stop the Chinese vessel, but the crew did not listen. They increased the speed of their boat. They tried to beat the Taiwanese Coast Guard. This led to a high-speed chase and ended in a mishap. The Chinese fishing boat capsized. All 4 of its crew members fell into the sea. Taiwan's Coast Guard managed to rescue 2 of them. The other 2 drowned. China issued a sharp statement about this incident. It blamed Taiwan's leaders for these deaths, especially the ruling party, the Democratic People's Party of Taiwan, which is a pro-democracy party, as their name suggests. They oppose reunification with China. And this party also won the presidential election last month. Of course, Beijing was not happy with the result, and now they're taking a fresh aim at Taipei.
So who is against cross-strait reunification and wants to pursue independence? It is not us, but the governing party on the island, which is called the Democratic Progressive Party. Therefore, to uphold the One China policy, we should support China's peaceful reunification. If we want to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, we must resolutely oppose Taiwan independence, because Taiwan independence and stability in the Taiwan Strait are incompatible.
That was China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He claims China wants peace and stability. The problem is China wants it on its own terms. For them, peace and stability will be achieved only if the neighbors surrender. And that won't happen. So China is spoiling for a conflict, and conflict means financial ruin. Just ask Israel. Their war on Hamas has now reached 137 days. Gaza's economy is virtually wiped out. Gaza is wiped out. But Israel too is feeling the heat. Their latest GDP numbers are out, and I must say it does not look good for Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel's GDP fell by around 5% in the last quarter. That's from October to December. They fell by 5%. It's much worse than expected. Most experts had predicted a 2.6% drop in GDP, but the actual fall is almost twice that. What explains this? In one word, war. Before the Hamas attack, things were fine. In 2022, Israel's economy grew by 6.5%. That was the pandemic rebound. In 2023, the projection was 3.7%. But on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel, and Israel responded by waging war in Gaza, so the economy crashed. Let's look at some individual indicators. Private spending dropped by more than 26%. Exports dropped 18%, and capital investments fell by almost 68%. Let's call this the war effect. 2 sectors were most affected by the fighting. One, the construction industry, It makes up 14% of Israel's GDP, the construction industry, and 2, the tech industry, which makes up 18% of the country's GDP. Both sectors struggled with manpower. You see, Israel had called up some 300,000 reserve soldiers. 3 lakh soldiers for you and me, that may not sound like very much, but Israel's total population is just under 10 million. So the workforce shrank. The tech industry lost 15% of its workers. In construction, many projects had to be halted. Before the war, Palestinians would travel to Israel for work, both from Gaza and the West Bank. But after the war, that stopped. So the 2 main engines of Israel's economy struggled. Add to that war expenses. Israel is living near Gaza and Lebanon. Israelis rather living near Gaza and Lebanon had to be relocated. That meant housing subsidies. Many families also needed financial support. After all, their breadwinners had been recruited to fight. And finally, you have direct military spending. Guess how much the total bill is? Possibly $70 billion by the end of 2025. Compare this to the other nation at war, Russia. You would expect them to be worse off. A, they face a stronger adversary in Ukraine, and B, they face hundreds of sanctions. Yet, Russia's economy is actually growing. Their GDP rose by 5.5% in the last quarter, 5.5% growth. What does that tell you? For starters, Russia's economy seems more resilient. Putin has spent years preparing for this scenario. They also have a trump card, oil and gas. Every month, Moscow gets billions of dollars from energy sales. That's a comfort that Israel does not have. Secondly, population size. Russia has some 144 million people. Israel has just 10 million. Hence, the different economic trajectory. Having said that, it's not game over for Israel. The ground operation should wind down later this year, meaning the reservists will go back to their jobs. Plus, we haven't seen a corporate exodus. It's not like companies are packing up and leaving Israel. In fact, some of them are investing more, like Intel. In December, they announced plans for a new factory in Israel, a $25 billion project by Intel. So the belief is that things will improve in 2024. Let's also hope it's a learning curve for Israeli politicians. They can't afford to think war is good business, because in small countries it's not. If a war with Gaza was this bad, imagine a wider war. Imagine full-blown fighting with Lebanon. It would crush the Israeli economy. So that's one more reason for Prime Minister Netanyahu to reconsider his strategy, if not for Gazans, then for his own people. Now let's talk about the other war, the Ukraine war. 2023 started on a high for Ukraine. It was planning a counter-offensive. The West was rallying behind it. The spirits were high. Ukraine felt like it could win this war. But a year later, the picture looks bleak. Ukraine has not made any gains on the battlefield. The army is accused of corruption. Things are not looking good at the front lines, and Western aid is drying up. So is this the year they lose the war? Let's look at what's happening on the ground. This weekend, Russia's offensive got a major boost. It captured the town of Avdiivka. It's located in eastern Ukraine. For Russia, capturing this town is a big deal. Their biggest victory since Bakhmut. That was in the month of May last year, the victory of Bakhmut. But that's not the only reason why this is significant. Avdiivka is a prize because of where it's located. Let me pull up the map for you. Avdiivka is located in the Donbas region. The town is a gateway to Donetsk. In 2014, Russian-backed fighters captured the city of Donetsk. They also captured Avdiivka. Ukraine fought for both. It could not win back Donetsk, but it got back Avdiivka. Soon the town became a crucial symbol, a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. But Moscow did not give up. Last October, it launched a wave of attacks, all of them targeted at this town. Avdiivka had a population of around 34,000. Most of them fled. The town was battered. Some parts of it nearly destroyed. It became a ghost town. But Russia did not stop. The battle went on for months. Last week, Moscow ramped up its attacks. Its military pounded the Ukrainian forces. It was dropping almost 60 bombs per day, 60 per day. By the weekend, the Russians had surrounded Avdiivka. Ukrainian forces had two options: fight and die or retreat. They chose to retreat.
We didn't have enough people, we didn't have enough shells, we didn't have enough possibilities to throw them back. If we had a large amount or at least an okay amount of shells, we could have stopped the enemy, but unfortunately we didn't have them.
So that's the Ukrainian version. They did not have enough people, they did not have enough ammunition. That's why Avdiivka fell. But what is Zelensky saying? He is in fact blaming the West for this, for delaying the aid. The Ukrainian president says it's working in Russia's favor.
It is now an extremely difficult situation in several parts of the front line, exactly where Russian troops have concentrated maximum reserves. They are taking advantage of delays in aid to Ukraine, and this is a very sensitive matter. Artillery shortages, the need for frontline air defense, and for a longer range for our weapons.
So has Russia changed the tide of this war? Capturing Avdiivka was crucial. It gives Moscow dual advantage, access to Donetsk and pushing back the Ukrainian front line. But more than that, this is a symbolic victory. The war is nearing its second anniversary. Ukraine has barely made any gains. Western unity is crumbling. The US can't seem to pass an aid bill. A $60 billion aid package is held up in Washington. Meanwhile, Europe can't match Washington's spending. When the war began, the EU promised nearly $53 billion in aid. So far, they've delivered only $37 billion. Perhaps this is what Putin was waiting for the West to falter. Does that mean Russia can win this war in 2024? Well, this is where things stand. Ukraine is on the defensive, resisting Russian attacks and trying to avoid a full-scale fight. On the other side, Russia is on the offensive. It has boosted military spending. Moscow will increase it by almost 70% this year. It is also mobilizing more troops. In December, Putin signed a decree to increase troop strength by almost 170,000. 170,000 more soldiers. That will make a total of 1.32 million Russian troops. So Russia is committed to this offensive because at the end of the day, this is a war of attrition. Whoever survives longer wins it. And at this point, it is advantage Russia. Now let's turn to Australia. The land down under is feeling the heat and the need to increase its defences. It made an announcement today. Australia is significantly expanding its navy. It will more than double its warships. Right now they have 11 major warships. They plan to increase it to 26. This will make the country more battle ready than it has been in generations.
Today, the Albanese government is announcing an increase in the number of warships in the Royal Australian Navy to being the largest fleet since the end of the Second World War.
Here's the breakdown of battleships. Australia plans to field 3 Hobart-class air warfare destroyers, 6 Hunter-class frigates, 11 general-purpose frigates, and 6 large, optionally crewed surface vessels. That means drone ships, optionally crewed. That adds up to 26 major warships. Along with this, 25 minor war vessels will be built. Now, most of these are new projects. Australia currently has just 3 Hobart-class destroyers in active service. Construction of the Hunter frigates began last year. The first one is expected only by 2031, and the acquisition of the other 2 warship types is yet to begin. So the entire naval upgrade is a long-term plan, and it will be expensive. Canberra has earmarked an additional $7.25 billion for this. And this is just for the surface vessels, the ones that I mentioned. There's even more set aside for submarines. Australia is planning to acquire nuclear-powered submarines as part of AUKUS. AUKUS, you would know, is a security partnership between Australia, the UK and the US. Australia will buy at least 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines from the US in the next decade. Plus, it will build 5 SSN AUKUS-type submarines for itself. So Australia's overall naval upgrade budget is much bigger, some $13.5 billion over the next decade. It's a hefty investment. But what has brought this on? This is what Australia's Deputy Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting, the Royal Australian Navy must be able to ensure the safety and security of our sea lines of communication and trade routes as they are fundamental to our way of life and our prosperity. He spoke about protecting trade and communication. But it's hard to imagine pirates from Polynesia blockading Australia. The chief of the Australian Navy was a bit more forthcoming. This is what he said, I'm quoting again. A strong Australia relies on a strong Navy, one that is equipped to conduct diplomacy in our region, deter potential adversaries and defend our national interests when called. Australia is preparing to defend itself against potential adversaries. It plans to use its upgraded Navy to conduct regional diplomacy. Both these goals are a way to counter China. China has been vying for naval supremacy in the Pacific, directly challenging American and Western hegemony in the region. Beijing has been courting Pacific Island nations, trying to win them over to its side with promises of investment and security. That's where a strong Australian Navy comes in, as an alternate source of security for Pacific Island nations and a way to deter other Chinese ambitions. Like an attack on Taiwan or other Western allies. Even though it wasn't named today, China is the reason for Australia's naval upgrade. It's the reason for the formation of AUKUS. It's the reason for the Quad alliance between Australia, India, Japan and the US. And it's the reason for Australia's naval militarization. But will 26 warships be enough to deter Beijing? I ask because China has the largest navy in the world with 140 major surface vessels. This is according to the US Department of Defense. Australia's 26 warships alone will not worry China, but alongside its allies, Australia may be able to help contain Beijing's aggression. Scabies, measles, rickets, scurvy. You may wonder why I'm giving you the names of diseases. These are all 19th century diseases. They were rampant back then, but soon science progressed, medicines became widely available, vaccines were invented, they offered protection, so these diseases receded. We rarely see them now, but in the UK they're making a comeback. Why is that? Why are diseases from the Victorian era plaguing UK citizens? Our next report has the answer.
Scabies. It's a disease humankind has known forever. Aristotle talked about it, Arab physicians mentioned it. In the Victorian period, it was infectious. Scabies is transmitted by tiny mites. They lay eggs under the skin. It causes an itchy rash. Usually, it spreads by close contact. It's associated with overcrowding or poor hygiene. It was thought to be a disease of the past. Modern medicine made it rare, but it's making a comeback in the UK. The UK is witnessing 3 scabies cases per 100,000 people. That's double the average. In some areas, they're almost as high as 6 cases per 100,000 people. There's an outbreak in care homes, in nursing homes, and in university accommodation. It's a public health crisis, and it's not the only one. In 2022, 423 people were admitted to various hospitals in the UK for rickets. It's a disease caused by vitamin D deficiency, even a lack of calcium. 188 people were admitted for scurvy, another disease caused by malnutrition. Measles cases are also on the rise. In 2023, the UK witnessed over 1,600 measles cases, a sharp rise from 360 cases in 2021. So what explains this trend? Why are 19th century diseases making a comeback? Experts cite 3 main reasons. 1 is vaccine hesitancy, 2 a cost of living crisis, and 3 cuts to public health spending. So let's look at the first one, vaccine hesitancy. Take measles for example. It's a highly contagious disease. In 1968, the UK introduced measles vaccination. In 1996, they introduced the current 2-dose MMR vaccine. It's very effective. After both doses, 99% people are protected against measles. But people are still getting the disease. Why? It's because vaccination rates are falling. It was affected during the pandemic. Since the focus was on COVID-19 vaccines, others were neglected. And vaccine hesitancy only makes the problem worse. In 2018, 93% people thought vaccines were important for children. Today, the number is at 72%. People are simply not taking it or not showing up for the second dose. Then there's the cost of living crisis. Poverty and disease are often related. In the UK, 14.4 million people are living in poverty. 6 million of them are in deep poverty. It's a number that's fast rising. These people can't afford food, they can't afford proper nutrition, which explains the rise in diseases like scurvy and rickets. And finally, there are cuts to public health spending. The UK does not have enough health workers. These are people who can set up mobile vaccination centres. Then there's also a lack of health visitors. These are people who work with new babies. They consult with the family from when the baby is born to the age of 5. This includes individual support, vaccination advice, assessing needs and growth of babies. The number of health visitors in the UK has fallen by 40% since 2015. So there's not enough help, which explains the growing crisis. Children are missing out on vaccines, adults are not getting enough nutrition, and infectious diseases are on the rise. If the UK doesn't deal with this soon, it would be like stepping back in time for the country. And that is not a pretty picture.
Our next story broke today, but it actually began in September last year. That's when Kim Jong-un visited Russia. He met Vladimir Putin there, held talks with him, also got a tour of a satellite launch center. Later, Putin showed off his limousine to Kim, the Russian Aurus. Take a look. Looks like Kim Jong-un liked it. Maybe that's why Putin decided to gift him one. That's right. Kim has received an Aurus limousine from Putin. It was delivered by Russian officials over the weekend. Kim's sister thanked Putin for the gift. She said it's a sign of their special personal relationship. Let's tell you about the car now. Aurus was founded in 2018. Putin wanted his own line of luxury cars made in Russia for Russia. Thus, Aurus was born. This limousine is called the Senat. Gearheads will tell you it looks like a Rolls-Royce, and yes, there is a similarity. The Senat is more than 5 meters long. It weighs around 2,700 kilograms. It's the same model that Putin uses for his official trips. But that one weighs a bit more. You see, Putin has made some modifications to his car. His Aurus Senat has a bulletproof armor, reinforced glass, bomb-resistant floors, integrated offensive systems, self-contained oxygen supply, and a secure communication line. It's a car/tank. We don't know if Kim's gift has the same modifications. If not, trust him to add those, because the North Korean leader loves cars, especially the luxury ones. On most days, you will see Kim in his Mercedes Maybach Pullman Guard. It costs more than $1 million. In 2018, he was spotted in a black Rolls-Royce. The same year, he bought 2 Maybach S600 Guard cars. So long story short, Rocket Man is also a petrol head. Between 2015 and 2017, he imported 800 luxury cars. So you can imagine his collection. Just one problem though, you can't sell luxury cars to North Korea. The United Nations has sanctioned them for the nuclear program. Russia is also supposed to follow that, to uphold those sanctions. So this gift is a legal grey area. But clearly Vladimir Putin does not mind. Reports say North Korea has shipped a lot of artillery to Russia to be used in the war against Ukraine. Reports also say Putin may visit Pyongyang soon. Now that would be huge, because North Korea is not on most diplomatic bucket lists. But like I said, Putin doesn't mind. Let's keep the politics aside though. Let's focus on gifts. World leaders do exchange things when they meet. Sometimes it's a cultural item, sometimes it's a personal gift, and sometimes it's just plain strange. Just ask former US President George Bush. In 2003, Argentina gifted him 300 pounds of raw lamb meat. 300 pounds of it. Why? Even the archives do not know. But animals, dead or alive, are top picks. Former French President François Hollande got a camel. It was Mali's way of thanking him. Of course, the LAC palace could not tie it to the front yard, so the camel was given to a family in Mali. Guess what they did? Killed it, cooked it, and ate it. The Russian president has also received animals as gifts. In 2017, he got a puppy from Turkmenistan. Take a look at this. Usually gifting has a rule: don't make it about yourself, make it about the other person. But the UK royal family has missed the memo. In 2021, Britain hosted the G7 summit. The late Queen Elizabeth met US President Joe Biden, and guess what she gifted him? A picture of herself. Her grandson Prince Harry did the same. He gifted pictures of himself to many US officials, including Barack Obama in 2015. I'm hoping it's some confusing royal tradition, because if not, it's plain weird. Now, diplomatic gifting is different from normal gifting. Here, there's politics involved. Like in 2009, when Hillary Clinton gifted Russia a big red button, it said reset in Russian. At least that's what the US government thought. Russian officials pointed out it did not say reset, it said overloaded. Safe to say that gift did not work. So I guess the lesson is quite simple. You can't use gifts to reset or revive your bad relations. It can only make a good relationship better, not a bad relationship good. Let's see how Putin's car performs on that metric. Surgeries delayed, patients turned away, essential care disrupted. This is the state of hospitals in South Korea this week. The nation has among the fewest physicians per capita in the developed world. So this month, the government announced plans. It wants to raise admission quota for medical schools by 65%. But the plan was immediately criticized by doctors in South Korea. They said the government is ignoring real issues that face medical care. On Monday, more than 6,000 doctors threatened resignations. Today, thousands took to the streets. So far, the government has refused to budge. But while this tussle persists, it is the people of South Korea who are suffering. Here's a report.
Earlier this month, the South Korean government announced a plan to raise the nation's quota for medical schools by 65%. The medical school admission would increase to 5,000, up from 3,000 per year. You see, South Korea has an affordable healthcare system, but it has among the fewest physicians per capita in the developed world. The country has only 2.6 doctors per 1,000 people, way below the average of 3.7 in countries belonging to the OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, basically a club of rich nations. South Korea has the second lowest physician-to-people ratio. Only Mexico fares worse. And this poses many problems. Primary among them is South Korea's rapidly aging population, which means it needs more doctors, especially in the rural areas where healthcare facilities are in a sorry state, which is why the plan to raise the admission quota was announced, and most South Koreans approved of it, except the doctors. They immediately criticized the plan and took to the streets. On Monday, more than 6,000 doctors in training resigned. That's over half the nation's physicians. Today, thousands took to the streets, and this is the result. Medical centers are reporting disruptions in operations. Patients are being sent back. Critical surgeries are being delayed.
As a person of this country and a patient, I feel like they are using sick people as an excuse. I hope doctors and the government find some compromise and quickly return to their posts so that patients don't miss their treatment.
But the question is, why are the doctors protesting? They say the shortage of doctors is not industry-wide. It is confined to particular specialties, like emergency care. They claim the government is ignoring the real issue and not fixing what makes some specialties unappealing, like harsh working conditions, low wages, and the burnout epidemic. Surveys say doctors in training work over 80 hours a week in South Korea. They regularly work multiple shifts that last longer than 24 hours. The doctors want the government to fix this. But that's not all. They argue that the new policy would make things worse. How? It would lead to an overflow of doctors, affecting their job prospects. Also, it might lead to competition among doctors. Why is this a bad thing? It could impact their salaries. Then there is the risk of over-treatment of patients, as well as lower quality of medical education. But the government is not convinced by these arguments.
Trainee doctors should not take collective action by taking people's life and health hostage. The increase of medical school enrollment can no longer be delayed.
If the admissions quota is not increased, by 2035, South Korea will have a shortage of around 10,000 doctors. This could birth a medical care crisis. So officials are urging doctors to stay in their posts, warning of legal repercussions for those who refuse to comply. And caught in this tussle between the government and doctors are ordinary South Koreans. Some in urgent need of medical care, but with nowhere to go.
Now let's turn our attention to the UK. British schools have been given a new guidance to stop the use of mobile phones in classrooms. The guidance is not statutory. There is no law banning phones in British schools. So this is more like a harsh request. And the execution depends on schools. They can implement the guidance depending on their creativity levels, like blanket bans on mobiles in schools, orders to leave all phones at home, putting mobiles inside inaccessible lockers, or letting students keep them as long as the devices are never seen, used or heard. Not my words, the guidance says all of this. But if you think this is corny, wait for it.
One of the biggest issues children and teachers grapple with every day is the impact of... See how frustrating that is. Almost 1/3 of secondary school pupils said their lessons were disrupted by phones. We know that they're a distraction in the classroom and cause bullying in schools. Many schools have already banned them, which has led to a safer and better learning environment for their students. Now, we're publishing new guidance so other schools have the support they need to do the same.
That, of course, is British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Thanks to this video, he has gone viral. He's being mocked on social media, not just for his acting chops, but also the guideline that he's issued. Critics say it's more of the same. Currently, the UK has a mixed policy. Some schools have blanket bans on mobile phones, others allow them during break time. So Sunak's policy is not bringing anything new to the table. And there is a bigger problem here. Smartphone crackdowns are contentious. It is undisputed that smartphones can be a distraction in classrooms and in life. They can build social pressure and fuel cyberbullying. But banning them comes with practical concerns. Students use phones to contact parents during commute. They also use phones as payment methods, and the bans disproportionately punish parents with jobs and other family responsibilities. Plus, no one is sure if school cell phone bans even work. A US study claims schools with cell phone bans reported higher rates of cyberbullying. Meanwhile, a Spanish study saw a reduction in cyberbullying after cell phone bans. And according to a study in Norway, smartphone bans improved grades of female students only. So this is a complex problem. But in many countries, smartphone bans are the go-to solution. Almost 1 in 4 countries have banned phones in schools, either through law or by means of policies. We see this from Colombia to Côte d'Ivoire and from Italy to the Netherlands. But bans are more common in Asia. In most Asian countries, mobiles in schools are a big no-no. Both Bangladesh and Singapore ban smartphones. India does not have a nationwide ban, but most state governments and schools ban smartphones. The latest was announced in New Delhi. Last year, mobile phones were declared quote-unquote strictly forbidden in classrooms, all classrooms. Some other nations do not have blanket bans either, like France. The nation bans smartphone use in classrooms, but it doesn't apply to children with disability. Some nations have banned specific applications in schools. Germany has banned Microsoft products. Denmark bans Google Workspace. In America, some schools ban TikTok. So same problem, but different policies, and no clear answer, because in today's world, it is tough to separate tech from education. Much like the workplace, digital revolution is transforming education, and it holds immeasurable potential. You see, during the pandemic, mobile phones and laptops stopped an educational meltdown. More than 1 billion students moved to online learning. And it's not just about smartphones. Children are using Google Docs for collaborative projects. ChatGPT is being used in schools. Students are using 3D printers. Meanwhile, teachers are using AI to automate tasks. Many classrooms have smart boards. Students are given homework on tablets. The truth is, the use of digital learning products is increasing across the board. But schools are still trying to figure out how to make it work, and governments are scrambling to curb the downsides. So using technology in classrooms may be inevitable. But it's only half the battle. The rest of it is getting the balance right, and it will only happen when the grown-ups stop playing catch-up with technology. For our last story tonight, let's turn our attention to South Africa. There was an uproar in the city of Cape Town yesterday. A disgusting smell had blanketed parts of the city. Residents were horrified. They raised multiple complaints. The city officials scrambled to find the source. Eventually, they traced the sewage smell to a ship, a docked ship called the Al Kuwait. How was a ship able to stink up a city? Because of what it was carrying. The Al Kuwait was transporting 19,000 live cattle, carrying them from Brazil to Iraq. The animals had been on board the ship for days, sitting in their own filth while being transported for the slaughter. The smell was bad enough to cause a city to choke up. It raises questions about the global livestock transport industry and the conditions animals are subjected to. Here's our report.
A foul smell swept across South Africa's Cape Town yesterday. Residents were left horrified as the putrid stench covered parts of the city. They complained to Cape Town's mayoral office, which scrambled to identify the cause. These were the urgent updates from a member of the Water and Sanitation Department. You can see how he was trying to reassure Cape Town residents and the urgency with which the investigation was being conducted. It just hints at how awful the smell must have been. Eventually, the source was discovered. It was a ship, the Al Kuwait. It was carrying 19,000 cattle, taking them from Brazil to Iraq. The cattle had already spent 2.5 weeks on board. They still had days to go before arriving at their destination, but already the smell was described as unimaginable. A South African animal welfare organization was monitoring the situation. It's called the National Council of Societies for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They boarded the ship, took stock of the situation, and issued a statement. They said the smell was due to a buildup of feces and ammonia. This is from thousands of animals who had been at sea for weeks. They added that the cattle were confined to cramped quarters with limited ventilation and hygiene. This is the state of the livestock transport industry. Thousands of animals are crammed on a ship. They have to endure stormy seas and the harsh sun, stewing in their own filth until they reach their destination, where they are then killed and turned into food. The Cape Town ship isn't even the worst example of cruelty this month. On January 5th, a ship set sail from Australia. It was going to Israel, carrying about 14,000 sheep and 2,000 cattle. But as the ship approached its destination, it was ordered to turn back. It was at risk of getting attacked by the Yemen-based Houthis in the Red Sea. So the ship returned to Australia. Then it spent days off the coast of Western Australia while the authorities inspected it. The animals on board had to suffer even longer while all this went on. They were eventually allowed to disembark after over 6 weeks at sea. You can imagine the smell and the horrid conditions.
So they would have been waist deep or knee deep in their own waste. Not ideal conditions at all.
That's putting it mildly. These are the prevailing conditions in the global live export industry. Every year, millions of animals suffer this fate, eventually to end up on someone's plate. The exports help people in countries at risk of famine. But do we need to make the animals go through such cruel conditions? Live transport may be cheaper than transporting meat in cold storage, but does the cost justify the cruelty? Cape Town got a whiff of the horrid conditions animals are subjected to. It should be a wake-up call and force us to find alternatives to this foul situation.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Greece, a convoy of tractors is heading to Athens as farmers protest over high production costs. In China, a pack of wolves were caught tunneling through the snow to reach their destination. And Asia's biggest aviation gathering kicks off in Singapore with more than 1,000 companies participating. Finally, we take you back in history. On this day in 1913, Australia started building its new capital, Canberra. The city was chosen as the capital as a compromise between rivals Sydney and Melbourne. Canberra was a fully planned city. Its development was delayed by the two world wars and the Great Depression. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.